Hey folks, Zefka here with a bit of an unscripted look at the first Resto Druid stuff, data mined from Shadowlands. So let's get started. So we're not going to have a good look at the numbers in general, it's just looking at the theme of what Blizzard are trying to go for here. So we're going to start off with the ability changes. So starting off first we have Innovate, and now whenever you cast Innovate on another healer, 50% of the effect, which is the mana reduction, will be cast on yourself as well. Now in a single, one healer setting dungeon, this is not going to make any difference, but in multiple healer settings like a raid, then this is much more useful and you can use it on other healers, and maybe it'll inspire me to use it a bit more. I'm terrible at using it. So Iron Bark, its cooldown is being increased from 60 seconds to 90 seconds. That doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're struggling to use it and waiting for it to come off cooldown, 50% extra cooldown can feel like a lot. On the flip side though, it is getting the Stonebark talent which baked into it, which increases the heal over time effect on the target by 20%. So it's going to be stronger when it's up, it's just not going to be as flexible to use all the time. We're also getting Nature's Swiftness, which is a new ability. This is a free regrowth. It also affects entangling roots and something else, but it's mainly going to be for regrowth. It'll increase the healing from that regrowth by 100%. It's on a minute cooldown and it can be used in any form. So that means while you're cat weaving or potentially moonkin weaving, you can just cast your regrowth, not leave the form. Fantastic. Regrowth itself has gotten a 40% increased crit chance if the hot is already on the target. So that means if you're busy pumping your tank full of heals, or whoever else is taking lots of damage, they've already got the hots rolling on them, and all you can really do is throw regrowth at them. That means that your second regrowth you're going to put on them is going to be that much stronger, so it should really help get people up once you put the time into them. Swiftmend, its cooldown is going down from 25 seconds to 15, so quite a bit, but it is going to consume one of 3 hots that you have on the target and will require one on the target to work. So in order, it will try and take regrowth first if possible. If not, it will try and take wild growth, and then after that it will try and take rejuvenation. So this is overall a pretty good buff for Swiftmend, to be honest. Yes, consuming the hot may feel like, oh, I'm removing one of my hots, I really do like my hots. But in the grand scheme of things, Swiftmend's a pretty good heal, and it's very easy to just reapply the hot afterwards. I mean, our hots are our best amount of healing anyway. So if it consumes like a rejuvenation, worst case scenario, you just rejuvenate them again and it's fine. And lastly, for new abilities that everyone's getting, is Cyclone. This is another form of PvP talent and one that people in the past may know. So it's an immune CC, so the target is completely immune to everything while they're in it for 6 seconds. So whether it affects bolstering, I'm not entirely sure. I think there are a few immune CCs, but I don't really tend to run with the Warlock right now, so I don't know whether Banish prevents bolstering or not. But it's just a short-term emergency CC if you need it. So looking at the talents, we have a few changes to existing talents, and we have 3 new talents as well as 3 talents that are going. So the first talent that's going is the Prosperity one, the one that reduced the cooldown of Swiftmend. And instead we now have Nourish. This is a 2-second cast, simple heal, but it has triple mastery effect on it. So our mastery currently is whenever you increased healing, whenever you heal someone who's got hots, based on how many hots they have. So this is another good sort of tank, or whoever's got all your hots on them, heal. So if you put your life bloom, you put your rejuvenation, maybe your germination, cultivation, wild growth, everything on that person, and they're like still taking so much damage, you can just Nourish, get a huge heal from Nourish on them. So it's really good for single target. So while the regrowth critical one, the first one, is quite good if maybe everyone's taking a bit of damage and you just need to fill in the gaps with regrowth, this one very good if a single person is who you're really worried about, and you're expecting heavy one single player damage. And then Cenarian Ward fitting in the niche of not of having a nice sort of cooldown, very efficient heal on a short cooldown if you just need something then to be very efficient and maybe do a bit of DPS in the meantime. So all the affinity talents are getting a CC ability baked into them. The Resto one, which obviously is Resto Druid you'll have by default anyway, is Ursul's Vortex, so you're all used to that already. Balance Affinity is getting Typhoon, so that means that talent is going away. Feral Affinity is getting Maim, which is a bit like Kidney Shot. I believe it has a bit of damage baked into it, but it's very similar to Kidney Shot. And Guardian Affinity is getting Incapacitating Roar. So of the three, I think Typhoon is probably the stronger of the abilities. Incapacitating Roar's got some nice AoE sort of interrupt uses, but Typhoon on the whole is probably the strongest. It is also worth noting that Feral Affinity is having its energy regeneration reduced, at least as of right now on the PTR Alpha, from 45% to 35%. This means that on the whole you're going to be just doing less shreds and sort of swipes, and it also means that keeping up, getting a ferocious bite in between rips is going to be that much harder. Going up to the CC talent row, Mighty Bash is getting nerfed. Its cooldown, currently at least, is going up to 1 minute, and its duration is going down to 4 seconds from 5 seconds currently. Now, I already didn't really take it that much, but I do know it was the go-to in arenas, so this is just a slight nerf there. Replacing Typhoon in this one, we actually have a non-CC ability, and that's Heart of the Wild. So this is on a 5-minute cooldown. It will buff you for 45 seconds and increase the power of your affinity abilities by 30% if you've gone for one of the DPS ones. It does something else for Guardian Affinity, but we're mainly looking at the DPS abilities here, so Balance Affinity or Feral Affinity. Now, my thought with this is that actually this, combined with the Feral Affinity nerf, might actually push Moonkin Weaving, Moon Weaving, Owl Weaving, Kin Weaving, all of that good stuff, whatever you want to call it, into being slightly stronger than Feral Affinity. You're going to have Typhoon, which I think is probably better than Maim on the whole, unless your group is really starved for stuns. But also, Feral Affinity, the effect, what counts as a Feral Affinity ability, we don't quite know yet, but Moonfire and Sunfire most likely not, and also melee damage, which is a big source of Feral Affinity damage, even more so when you're going to reduce the energy of regeneration that you have. All of that is probably not going to be increased by Heart of the Wild, or at least doesn't seem to be based on the wording. Whereas I could see Balance Affinity, your Star Strike, or whatever the new Lunar Surge is called, Star Surge, that'll be increased. Probably Wrath, and I mean I can also see Sunfire and Moonfire. They are balanced abilities. So I could see all of those getting buffed by Heart of the Wild. So I can see Balance Affinity, potentially overtaking Feral Affinity as the go-to one. And our last talent change is Overgrowth. This is replacing the Stone Bark talent. And just like Stone Bark, it functions a similar way. It's designed to help on pure single target, and it's a form of PvP talent. So it's just going to apply your Life Bloom, your Wild Growth, your Rejuvenation, and your Regrowth to the target, all of the hots. So combos pretty well if you want to immediately just throw the Nourish into them. But on the whole, it's got a minute cooldown. It's relatively expensive, as of right now at least. And it's just going to be really difficult to compete with Spring Blossoms. Spring Blossoms has just been the go-to for a while. Just applying the extra hot on itself is just that great. And, I mean, even in the piece itself. So these sort of single target ones, the last one didn't work out too well, the Stonebark one, so I'm not too sure about this Overgrowth, but we'll see. Now we're going to have a look at the Covenant abilities, so we're just going to go through each one, looking at the standard one everyone gets, followed by the special Druid one, and just talk about how they're going to work for Resto. Now we have a bit more numbers to go with them. So the Kyrian one, I've said before, it's a 5-minute cooldown. It gives you a heal, or gives you an item. That gives you a heal and removes all your bleeds, poisons, and diseases, and that sort of stuff. Considering you're a healer, you probably don't need the heals. And considering you can remove curses and poisons already, you probably, this is not the reason to take Kyrian, that's for sure. Is the reason Kindred Spirits are symbiosis type effect, which is nowhere near symbiosis, to be honest. So on a minute cooldown, the person that you've sort of twinned with, you have 10 seconds of replicating 50% of the healing that you do overall to them. Now, generally speaking, you want to put this on the tank probably, because they're the person who's done most increased healing to you. Otherwise, like, you just expecting someone to take a lot of damage. But then if the tank has it, then the tank's ability, when you trigger it for them, will just redirect any damage you take towards the tank. Now, you shouldn't really anticipate taking a lot of damage. Generally, what you would want for this one is to get stats from the person you're linked with, but that means linking with a DPS. So overall, I think for Resto Druids, this is a bit a hit and miss with this one. I'm not so sure what they can really do about it. So for Venthyr, we've got their sort of blink or heroic leap type effect. It's a teleport they have. You basically like ground target, as far as I'm aware, and you just go to that location. So I mean, that's a pretty useful one, to be honest. I think the cooldown is fairly long. Going with it, we have Ravenous Fury. So that's the Druid specific one. So this is a 3-minute cooldown, and this one is much better than I first gave it credit for. I thought it was going to be a lot worse, but I can see this one being really strong. So for 20 seconds after you've used this 3-minute cooldown, it'll increase your haste, damage, and healing as you keep using abilities. So you have to use an ability every 1.5 seconds, or you'll be stunned, you'll take some damage, and all the buff will drop off. So over that 20 seconds, you need to make sure you keep using ability. Now, obviously, the quicker you use abilities, and if you can keep this up, you're going to be getting some really good numbers by the end. You need to make sure that for that 20 seconds, you are doing something. So if you're in combat, you are either DPSing or you are healing. And if your combat drops, you need to make sure that you just throw out some heals even while combat is not active. Just use mid-hit plus setting, you don't want to end up getting stunned afterwards. I can see this, like, at first I was like, it's going to be really annoying out in the world. But honestly, on a 3-minute cooldown, it's not too bad. You can just time it for when you really need it. So it seems relatively good. Overall, I think Venthyr could be quite a good option. I think there are a few more interesting ones, but I think this one will perform solidly. The Necrolords, their little ability that everyone gets is a 4-second cast time shield for 20% of your health, which is really quite bad considering you're a healer. If you use it next to a dead body, you get 50% shield, but that is still pretty bad. So, just like the Kyrian one, this is not the reason why you take Necrolords, but is the reason Adaptive Swarm. This 25-second cooldown, so the quickest of the lot. This is a 12-second hot or dot, depending on who you target, and when it expires, it will jump to an ally or an enemy, the opposite of the one that you previously cast it on, and it will jump 3 more times. So you'll use it on an enemy, it'll jump to a healer, an ally, then to an enemy, then back to an ally again. And it increases the effects of all periodic effects on the person, so that's damage or healing, by 20% from you. Now, considering periodic effects are your highest damage dealing abilities, and they are also happen to be your highest healing as well, 20% increase is very good for both damage and healing. And I think this one's going to be really good if you are sort of looking at mainly sort of cap weaving, and you do want to sort of alternate your healing and your damage and have a nice balance with that. A few questions on how it leaps. Is it smart? Will it try and jump to whoever's lowest on health? Will it jump to whoever's got the most hots on them? Is it smart to jump into their enemies, or will it just jump to a random enemy, the closest enemy to the person who previously had it? That'll all be good to know. Or is it a game of whack-a-mole? Whoever has it, right, that's who I need to throw my dots on. And if you are cap weaving, you've got 4 dots. That is a lot of dots that you're putting on. That is more dots than DPS have. So lastly, we have the Night Fae. They've got a 90-second cooldown sprint for 30%, which they can use again for Displace the Beast. So when they are in this form, they can just use it again for Displace the Beast on a bit of a cooldown. So again, these movement ones tend to be a bit better than the sort of healing based ones. But Convoke the Spirits, this is a 2-minute cooldown with a 4-second channel, and it's going to cast 16 spells. So that's going to be Regrowth, Rejuvenation, could be Moonfire, Wrath, Rake and Shred, not entirely sure. If it only does the healing spells, then it's basically just a backup Tranquility, or even stronger Tranquility maybe. But if it's going to cast DPS abilities, it's a bit better. But it's the fact that you need to channel it. So it's, I mean, yeah, you can stay in cat form and you can channel it to heal everyone back up and not have to worry about like leaving cat form. But you'd have to leave cat form anyway to cast Moonfire and Sunfire. So it's really a case of, is the burst amount of healing going to give you an increase of DPS? And while I think this one is better than Kindred Spirits, I do think that Adaptive Swarm and Ravenous Fury are the main ones that I would probably look at. But I'm going to try all of them out when I get access to the alpha. I intend to look at all of them anyway, and just sort of find out which one. It is worth noting that even though we're not sort of talking about balancing abilities here, they will probably balance them so all their healing outputs are roughly similar, but I'm pretty sure their interest in balancing DPS is not going to be as interesting or as in their mind. So while all of them might say, oh, all of them will increase your healing by like 20%, if one of them is like, hey, this will increase your healing by 20%, but also your damage by 15%, then then that one becomes a bit more viable. So that was it from the first beta build. Thank you for listening, and if you want to see more, then just hit the subscribe button. It's really good for the channel and really easy to press. Trust me, I've done it a fair few times. So, thanks for watching again, and see you next time.